Good evening. This is Tracy from the Finance Committee. I am the chair of the Finance Committee with your tutorial on how to fill out a budget request form. The first thing I'd like to go over just very briefly is the understanding of how the Pennsylvania Dental Hygienists Association comes up with the proposed budget every year, which allocates the funds to not only the officers or the committees, but also to any of our events, as far as annual session goes, continuing education, and so forth and so on. So with the help here, Linda is going to place up the proposed budget that was in your delegates manual in 2019, which ended up being the budget for this year. There's two different forms that you will see. One of them is the 4-column form that is always in the treasurer's report anytime we have any of our Board of Trustees meetings. And what this actually gives you is a little bit more of an understanding of what's actually going on at this point in time. So you will see the actual expenses, you will see what is budgeted, you will see the variance, and then Anita is so wonderful to actually give us last year's as well too. So it gives us a little bit of history at that point in time as well. The working budget is the one that you will also see. Now this goes down. The budget starts with disbursements. So you see that part of it first, and then it goes into the end of it, into the revenue part of it. And as our budget is, we have a lot more disbursements that happen than actual revenue. So we have to work harder on the revenue end to support all of the disbursements. Now, the other budget that you will see is the long form, is the one that gets placed in the delegates manual. It comes from the Finance Committee after the Budget Committee meets for their proposed budget. Now, this one has a little bit more of a detailed line items. So instead of just having, a brief line and a number on it, it goes a little bit more in depth into what actual line item it is. As far as for each of the meetings that we do, annual session, the board meetings, it goes into officers, it goes into disbursements for trustees, for committee chairs, anything that we have done that way that we have accepted on the budget from last year. You also have to remember it includes our independent contractors, it includes the expenses for annual session. Yes, we get revenue from annual session, but it also includes the expenses for annual session. Same with continuing education. We have revenue from continuing education, but we also have expenses for continuing education. And then of course we also have other meetings that we do. We also have ADHA. We have expenses for our delegates to go to the ADHA meeting. So those are all on this form as well too. So as we go down to the very, very end of it, after all the committees and after all these other ones, you will now see the revenue. The revenue side is 3 main areas. You have your membership dues, you have annual session, and you have our continuing education courses. Yes, there's some other areas that we get some revenue as well too, but those are the 3 main areas that we get our revenue. So we need to have a revenue amount that will sustain and support all the other things that we want to do in the organization for that year. And this is where the budget committee comes into play, and this is where your budget request forms come into play. We need to understand that sometimes we have to prioritize our monies for that year. We would love to be able to support everything and fund everything 100%, but that cannot always be the case. So we need to actually have the budget request forms that give us a proposed document of what you are going to accomplish for the following year, as well as the monies that you feel that it's going to be needed for that. So how we do that is by utilizing the strategic plan. Linda has been so wonderful to go through the strategic plan with her goals or most important agendas that she would like to stress in her coming years as presidency. So that is why she asked committee members, she asked trustees, board members as well, as far as this is where I would like to really put, a lot of my organization's time, money, and effort. This is what strategies, and this is the objectives I want to really try and accomplish. So what we need to do is we need the committees to look at the strategies that the president has deemed where she would like to put our efforts to, because that is where your efforts as a committee should be. So you should be aligning your efforts with the president's ideals as far as where we want to look for our monies, our efforts to go to for the next year. So when you're completing a budget request form, you need to fill in the strategies and what you are planning to have your monies do to help with the strategy part of the strategic plan that is now deemed the most important part. So completing a budget request form. The budget request forms will be sent out from me. And Linda, I think this one still has some numbers on it, so I don't know if you're able to remove those, edit that or not. I thought I got them all, but there does seem to still be some numbers on that one. But the budget request form that you will receive is blank. And you complete any expenses that you feel that you will have to incur to complete what your committee wants to do for the following year. Remember, the budget request form that we are filling out this year is for 2021. This is not for events that we're going to have from now until the end of the year, but this is for the following year. So as you can see, what they what they have down there is they have, what is your objective? And you have to pull that from your committee as well from the strategic plan. What is my objective? What part of the strategic plan is going to help me accomplish what we want to do for the coming year? You also have the opportunity to fill in the action plan. I know this seems to be redundant, but you need to understand when it comes to the budget committee meeting, we need this information. If you give us a budget request form that just has my expenses are going to be X amount of dollars, and that's what I'm asking for, case closed, with no other information, when it comes to that budget committee, we're going to feel that this is not a priority for you, and it's not going to be a priority for PDHA for next year. We need the information to understand what you're planning to do, what objectives and strategies you're going to be using for the strategic plan to help PDHA with its goals for the coming year. And the more that you fill that out, the more information that you give us and we receive that supports your request, it helps convince not only the budget committee, but also the PDHA officers and board of trustees. Yeah, this is important. We want to see this happen, or we want to move forward with this. Unfortunately, in this day and age, we are working in a deficit, which means we are not having enough revenue to cover our expenses. So unfortunately, we're going to have to be a little bit more picky and choosy about what we can fill in on that disbursement side. So your X amount of dollars will go to whatever programs really become to the forefront of what's most important. Now, please remember that the X amount of dollars is your proposed allotment of money. It does not mean that if you do not utilize all those funds, you have it for the coming year. It's a budget for 1 year and 1 year only, and it is budgeted for what that budget committee received. So if you decide to do something different, you need to make sure that it is okay with your committee members. And then you must also realize if for some reason that money is a different amount from what you have budgeted, you also need to substantiate that, because of course the treasurer will need to substantiate that, with the auditor as well too. And monies does not carry on from year to year. So also we have up there is Faye gave me the agreement that I could also place on her budget request form for the Leadership Development Committee. This was her budget request for this year, and the Leadership Development Committee, of course, is planning their continuing education course as part of the spring BOT. So I placed that in there because you can see she's got her objective down there of what she wants to accomplish. She has her strategy down there from the strategic plan, and she has her action plans listed on what she wants to do with that. So everything is very well detailed, so we understand exactly what the Leadership Development Committee is planning to do. And the more information, I said, as we can get, it's going to help the budget committee when we are at our meeting to figure out what can we do this year. And I thought she did a great job, so I asked if it would be okay for me to place hers on this webinar so that you also have it to kind of go back through. And please feel free, if you are still confused about this, to contact me if you would like to personally. I'd be more than willing to try and help you through it. Also remember, your leaders in this organization have done this for many, many years, and there's plenty out there also that are willing to help anyone who has a concern with this all as well too. So within the next month or so, or definitely after the spring BOT, at the spring BOT, I will tell everyone that the budget request forms will be placed onto Basecamp. They are also in your Scopes manual, which everybody should have on their little drive that was handed out this year. So if you do not have or cannot find them on Basecamp, please go into your Scopes manual, which is on your documents on the drive here, so that you also have the opportunity to see how a budget request form there. You can download that and you can utilize that as well too. The other thing that we wanted to just briefly talk about is I just lost my train of thought. You wanted the funding document. Did we get that by chance, Linda?
Yep. Can you see that there?
I can. Thank you very much. So,
okay.
The funding document, again, is what we utilize at the budget meeting for what we can use as an allotment or reimbursements. Unfortunately, depending on the revenue side of it, depends on exactly how much of these disbursements we can do. So just because it is listed on the funding document and it will say X amount of dollars for this or that, it still goes back and is superseded by the budget for that year. Because again, depending on how much monies we have to play with will depend on how much we can utilize from the funding document. So unfortunately, not always can we fill in every line item on the budget with some of these disbursements. We always will try. But again, it is a balancing act. Depending on the amount of monies that we have for disbursements, depends on what we can use on the disbursement side. As far as independent contractors come into play, the expenses to make the money, as Anita always loves to say, with annual session, yes, there's expenses with annual session. You got to use money or to make money, and that is definitely true. So there are still expenses there as well too. This is where your officers come into play, and this is where your committees come into play. So as you can tell, it does seem to be like a larger ball on the one side. So the more that we can work on the other side for the revenue, the more opportunities we have on the disbursement side for everyone. I think that's about all I can really say at this point in time. Again, just remember your budget is a guideline. It's not set in stone, and it is a fluid document that can change throughout the year. But it does give us at least a guideline so that we have a direction to go into. And what we really want to try to do is to get back to what is most important with the strategic plan, what is most important for us to accomplish this coming year, and that way we can make it hopefully even better for 2021.